Hello and welcome to the Enterprise Talk Conversation Series, a peer knowledge resource by the CXOs for the CXOs. Now to our host, Kanika Goswami.
Hi, and welcome to our podcast, On Stage with Enterprise Thought Leaders. My name is Kanika Goswami, and I'm the managing editor at On.media. We run six B2B enterprise technology platforms with very engaging conversations with global thought leaders and industry experts. Our conversations reach over 1.3 billion business leaders worldwide. Today we're speaking with Simon Thorpe. He's the Director of Product Marketing for Customer Service at Pega Systems. Welcome to our podcast, Simon. It's great to have you here with us today.
Thank you, Kanika, and thank you very much for inviting me. It's delighted to be here.
It's a pleasure. I'm sure we have very interesting conversations ahead of us. So a little bit about Simon before we start. As I said, he's the Director of Product Marketing for Customer Service at Pega Systems. As a global lead, he heads up a group of industry thought leaders who inspire businesses to think differently about how technology can be applied to improve customer engagement and digital transformation. Simon is a seasoned expert, and for over 20 years, he has dedicated his career to helping companies improve their customer experience. So, welcome to the studio, Simon, again, after the good words here. So, I'll just try to set the base for the conversation, the topic. As generative AI becomes more mainstream, it's not just businesses that are harnessing its power. Consumers are also using it to file complaints, request refunds, and provide feedback. With artificial intelligence making it easier than ever for consumers to voice dissatisfaction, businesses that aren't already seeing this shift will soon face an influx of new, more detailed complaints, which they may, find difficult to handle without evolving tools. So this raises a very key challenge of maintaining a response time while keeping up with an influx of complaints from increasingly more knowledgeable and aware customers. So I'm on the right track, Simon? Yes.
Well, I think so. Yes, I think it's very interesting how the boom around generative AI has hit the mainstream, not, as you said, just in the business audience, but in the consumer market as well. It was interesting, the other day I was teaching my mum, who's in her late 70s, how to use ChatGPT on her phone. And I think those kind of experiences are starting to hit more and more people as they realise how increasingly, these OpenAI tools are becoming more user-friendly, they're more accessible, and I think people are realising the real-world opportunities it can help them in their daily lives.
So this raises a key challenge, maintaining response times while keeping up with an influx of complaints from more knowledgeable and increasingly aware customers. So your thoughts on this, Simon?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. And to your point, I think the boom and the huge amount of press that the emergence of generative AI received has really started to hit not just the business community, but also the consumer community. I mean, I was just with my 76-year-old mother the other day, teaching her how to use ChatGPT on her mobile phone. And I can see that the more mainstream OpenAI becomes, more and more customers are going to start realizing that it is very accessible. It's pretty user-friendly, does some amazing things, and particularly the fact that you can personalize and use it to save yourself money and ultimately speed up pretty manual effort type interactions. I think more and more people in the consumer market will start using it, and that will have, as you say, an impact on things like the volume of complaints that come into an organisation, or people trying to use AI to help them apply for refunds, or really putting AI to work to make their life easier.
So do you see, you've already shared with us why you feel that the consumer adoption of AI is poised to accelerate. But would you also see a potential impact on complaint volumes if you're going to be using GenAI tools for customers to connect with the...
I think so. I mean, if you think about it, my own personal situation, my wife and I bought a new sofa a couple of months ago, which when it arrived at our home, it had to be made, and when it arrived, it wasn't exactly what we'd ordered. There was stitching that had gone awry, and the cushion linings weren't exactly as we'd ordered. Now, we spoke to the customer service centre and they were very pleasant, but ultimately and sadly it ended up in a complaint. Now, traditionally, writing a complaint was quite a labour-intensive thing. I'm not someone that particularly enjoys writing letters and going into the minutiae. But within a couple of seconds and, putting in a prompt into GenAI, I had a complaint ready to go that I could send off to the business. And I think, that can be done over your mobile phone whilst you're sat on a train or, going into the shops. The accessibility of GenAI to be able to then put that to work and make your life easier is there. So I can only imagine that volumes will go up. And although I don't have any specific data yet to back that up, I think it's just common sense. I think people will use it much, much more.
Yeah, I mean, if it gets so much easier to connect with the vendors, then definitely people are going to use it for much more. Yeah. So how do you think AI and automation can be best leveraged to streamline complaint handling, ensuring regulatory compliance even amid increasing volumes, as we just discussed?
Yeah, I mean, the first and obvious route is, organisations have got to get their house in order, not just in complaints, but, in all walks of life when it comes to customer contact and customer service. Unfortunately, we're at a pretty bad stage in customer service. It's at an all-time low across the world, according to the analysts and the industry bodies that measure these sorts of things. So it's not just complaints. An awful lot of complaint management in the enterprise is still managed manually. Lots and lots of people reading the actual complaint form or complaint letter, categorising to who needs to deal with it and moving it through the process. And that's just a ripe workflow, if you like, for automation and AI. The basic senses are things like, leveraging AI to triage the sentiment and the content of the complaint, using things like NLP to understand, key pieces of information that the customer is talking about. And, and then trying to leverage both a combination of AI and workflow automation to try and push the work to the right places in the business, supporting those individuals that need to be involved in that process to speed up their work or straight through process, and ultimately learn from those complaints. Because I've always thought, and many people have said this before me, that complaints are one of your biggest sources of customer intelligence. But very few organisations really leverage that feedback and that insight back into a closed loop process. And AI is a fantastic tool to understand what's going on, but also to, if used correctly with automation, build that continuous loop of developing and improving.
Yeah, that's actually a very interesting point. Very few organizations leverage the data they can get from complaints and then close the loop with probably better service going forward. So that's a big area where automation and AI can help.
And there's often, it's a bit like feedback surveys, Kanika. How often do we fill out a feedback survey and never hear back from an organisation? Complaints are a little different because obviously a lot of those times it's regulated. You have to hear back from a business based on the regulations they work towards. But often the closing the loop is closing the loop with the customer. It's not learning from that mistake, error, issue, and sharing that intelligence with multiple parts of the business, whether that's product development, whether it's marketing, whether it's a compliance team, or whether it's directly with the front office people, whether in the branch, in the store, on the contact centre, that might need to learn. And that's the thing where I'm very interested in how AI and automation can be used together to try and improve a business.
So you did bring up a point about compliance. So do you see a potential for regulators to enforce more responsible use of AI and introduce checks that perhaps verify fairness in automated complaint processes?
Well, it's already happening, Kanika. It's the EU took the first steps with a thing called the EU Act, the EU AI Act, I should say, which came in not so long ago. And really that is around companies aligning around stringent rules to position themselves as responsible AI users. And it really emphasises things like accuracy, robustness, non-discrimination, fairness, transparency, I'm trying to remember them all, and accountability. But what's interesting is that they really have a risk-based approach to this. So if an organisation in, for example, financial services, when there's arguably a bigger risk, they are under more scrutiny than maybe those that are using AI in a less potentially harmful way. So it's coming already, and I think organisations should really rally around these kinds of regulations. I know the US are looking at it. Australia already has something. At some point in the not too distant future, I'm sure we'll start seeing organisations promoting the fact that they provide some kind of a badge to say that they prescribe to fair AI usage. And customers are very smart people. They'll start looking for those signs as whether they will use it or not. But I also think, organisations need to be thinking about the outcomes that they want to provide for their customers, and be thinking about how AI can be built into that process. But AI is, only as good as how you teach it and how you use it. Without it driving to outcomes or getting work done for you, it's just a clever bit of kit. So you've got to be constantly thinking about auditing and training, measuring transparency, looking at bias detection, obviously things like data privacy and how you interact with consumers is critical. But all of these things need to be built into how AI is adopted, and I think that's happening. I think a lot of organisations are acutely aware of the risks involved, and that's just going to get more and more clear as more and more organisations use it. But also, when we're talking about things like complaints or consumers, the more consumers adopt AI, volumes go up, then I think companies are going to have to get on their toes and make sure that they are following suit. I mean, we know that there's lots and lots of ways AI can be leveraged to improve these kinds of processes, improving people that work on complaints or customer interactions, improve processes, improve straight through work between breaking down silos across an organisation. But the regulations, I think, will be very, very important. And now is the perfect time, if organisations that are listening to this haven't been aware, get yourself aware, because it's coming, and it's coming in a big way.
Yeah, I mean, with so much of increase in usage, you do need to have very stringent regulations. I think people are just meeting up with it. EU's come up with good ones, and there are a lot of opinions flying around in the enterprise sector about how useful they're going to be, and what more can be done about it. So
it's difficult because no one wants to stifle innovation. But at the same time, you do need checks and balances. And I think checks and balances are the real thing that organisations need to be thinking about in their own businesses. So rather than being just totally guided by the regulators, they need to have a stringent process internally to track, measure, continue to develop and learn.
Totally agree. So what practical strategies would you suggest to proactively mitigate complaints by enhancing customer experience, especially using AI-driven solutions?
Well, I think the first thing is, trying to, I think one complaints are a great source of feedback, as we talked about, but repeatedly making the same mistakes time and time again isn't effective for a business, isn't, good for customer service. It's problematic through and through. And AI provides great opportunity to learn, predictive analytics to help us understand and learn, but also anticipate customer problems. From a service perspective, we're certainly moving into the age of customers wanting us to proactively engage with them even before they realise there's a problem. You're about to hit your overdraft limit. A bank will know they're about to hit their overdraft limit and see a cost coming in. Should we be using and leveraging AI to let the customer know that overdraft limit might be hit based on an upcoming payment, to avoid any kind of overcharge. Businesses need to be thinking about how can they get on the front foot and proactively engage with the customer so that it avoids these kind of complaints or dissatisfaction. I think, we need to be more mindful of customers tend to complain because of, yes, products, but also service issues. And service, as I said at the start of this podcast, is very poor at the moment. We still have long wait times to speak to companies. We still have very ineffectual self-service capabilities that customers just don't feel that they can trust to get the outcome that they need. We still have lots and lots of challenges around the quality of service that customers are provided with. That is the root cause of a lot of complaints that come in, and organisations really need to be thinking about how can they leverage AI to solve the problem at the root of it first, to then have the long tail impact of a reduction in complaints, and by the way, a reduction in the cost that goes into providing bad service. And also the impact on things like loyalty, advocacy, and customer repeat business. So, I see AI playing a vital role on both sides of the coin for business in terms of helping improve, helping make them faster, quicker, more effective. But also, I think customers will use it more and more. And it's going to be kind of a race, I think, Kanika, in terms of who can get smartened up first, because it's not hard for consumers to use GenAI. It's much harder for an organisation to get their house in order. And unless they get their house in order, the volumes are going to spike and they're not going to be ready.
And sometimes it's all about just being heard. The campaign is all about just getting the attention from,
It is absolutely right. Yeah. And the amount of work that goes into managing complaints, particularly in regulated environments, is huge. Absolutely huge. Just by putting AI and workflow automation to work to try and reduce the manual effort of the steps that you have to go through to comply, it could be a huge opportunity for organizations to streamline.
Correct. What do you foresee about it? How do you see organizations being able to stay ahead of the growing trend of adopting chatbots or GenAI tools, and also ensuring they're equipped to handle the challenges that lie ahead for this use? So one of them, like I just mentioned, sometimes customers just need to be heard. That is point number one. And another point which comes to mind is, and this is slightly on the informal, or if I may use the word casual side, is everybody may not want to talk to a chatbot.
Exactly.
How do you then handle that kind of a challenge and yet get to engage positively with the customer, with the market, retain the trust, and make sure that they go away satisfied? How do organizations do that?
So I'm going to answer that question in a couple of parts, if I may, Kanika. To come back to the first part of that in terms of how can organisations stay ahead, I think one of the things that we are strongly advocating, and Pega Systems works with the biggest organisations in the world, and we're advocating this drive to what we call autonomous, or becoming an autonomous enterprise. So what we mean is that's effectively an enterprise that's powered by intelligence, AI, automation, and it becomes a self-optimizing business. That is moving towards goals, but is in complete control of the business. So it's basically, rather than people doing the work, AI and automation is doing the work guided by humans. So it's a flip on the typical way a business runs. And the way that we advocate that is by using closed loop AI that I talked about, and executing processes and actions, and immediately learning from that feedback and building that into the business, as we talked about. And there's different stages of autonomy. You might move from being a manual, automated, intelligent business. This move towards becoming an autonomous enterprise doesn't happen overnight. There's stages that you need to go to get there. And if anyone wants to contact me offline, I'd be very happy to talk to them about it. But ultimately, that should be the goal. Organisations should be thinking, how do we get to that stage? Because the way that we do business right now, with a heavy emphasis on people doing the work, is very quickly going to disappear. And the winners in this story will be those that get to become the autonomous enterprise the fastest, with all the considerations of responsible AI and regulation. Coming back to your other questions, I think your listeners, and I'm sure, Kanika, you'll be hearing more about agentic agents, those agents that use generative AI to interpret high-level, maybe ambiguous user requests. And what they're doing is they're taking that understanding and they're thinking about what tools they can use to make sense of that data and ultimately take action. And I think we'll see more and more of these agentic agents becoming part of this drive towards the autonomous enterprise. And ultimately, I think customers will cotton on to the power of these agentic agents, which is kind of the next stage in the development of OpenAI, where you're not just asking it a question that gives you an answer, or asking it to do something and it gives you some text. It'll take ownership of the action that you've asked it to do. So it might be, apply for this refund for me, or do this thing for me. That's really going to make things interesting, because you're not just getting a body of text, it's actually going through a process for you. The third part of your question was, not everyone feels comfortable talking to a chatbot or a machine. And I think that's totally fair. And I think it's going to take some time for the majority of consumers to feel they can trust and want to speak to or use self-service or use these agentic agents. And that comes down to trust. And that is growing slowly but surely. We didn't, as an industry, make a very good job of the first wave of chatbots, because frankly, they were a bit rubbish. They didn't do very much. They were very, hit and miss whether they did. So we turned a lot of customers off. So we're back into the mode of trying to build up trust. But I think you're always going to have customers, certainly some populations or part of the population, where there might be a high degree of uncertainty, something like, I can I'll give you an example. I can never imagine calling about a funeral plan for a deceased member of my family. I can't imagine doing that over self-service. I think I'm always going to want to speak to a human being, because humans like to speak to humans. The problem is, every interaction right now is going through to a human being. So most customer service organizations in enterprises don't have the capacity to handle those interactions where there's a high degree of emotion, because even the silly little things like opening times or where's my bank statement are still going through to the voice channel. So where I think more and more of the self-service, as it gets better, as trust is adopted, will be opening up capacity for the voice channel, and will be training customer service agents or CSRs or representatives in a different way, making them far more emotive, emotional EQ, better to be able to deal with those situations. So we anticipate that in the future, contact centres and customer service centres as we know it won't go away. The profile of them will change. There will no longer be the transient labour, the low-paid individuals that stay for 3 months. They'll become a vital part of that service chain, where the majority will use agentic agents, you'll use self-service and so on. But when you really, really want to feel like you need to speak to someone, or you need them to deliver value to you, that human channel will be available.
It'll also have a little bit to do about those tools becoming a little more intuitive instead of being repetitive and having standard questions and answers, which is how chatbots are doing right now. So if a customer's response is different from the X number of listed reasons out there, then it's not as efficient as it could have been.
Well, exactly. And that's that ambiguous nature of how, we're already using that with a number of our clients in our chat capabilities of infusing knowledge and infusing the capability of dealing with ambiguous questions, and it not just being a one-size-fits-all, you've not typed exactly the right thing we want you to type, ping, you're going to have to call the contact centre. I think we need to build back that trust, but a lot of this chat type self-service is becoming much, much better. But we need to keep consistency and keep showing customers that it can be used. Because if they realise that it can work and it works consistently, they'll use it. If it fails continually, it's gone. We'll be in another wave of, oh, we've tried and failed.
That is so true. That is very true. And that is how also you will need to build trust. Because a customer would not approach you with a complaint if they are not sure that it's going to be resolved.
Absolutely.
If that feedback loop doesn't happen, then you've already lost the customer for the next purchase.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I think those are the questions I have, and I really appreciate the time that you put in for us, and also the discussion. Very enlightening, very interesting. Thank you so much for your time, Simon.
Thank you so much for being with us. Please do follow us on social media for regular updates and new content.